All right, President Trump making good on his threats to Iran, unleashing a new wave of heavy strikes in response to attacks on American forces in the region, and even stronger strikes could be on the way.
So Peter Doocy is live in front of the White House with the latest. Peter.
And the president was chewing out his war planners with a string of expletives, according to a new report in NBC News, who describes him as very frustrated. The Iranians just won't fold. And so now the president has been presented an option by the head of CENTCOM to go big and escalate strikes. According to the Wall Street Journal, the idea behind Admiral Brad Cooper's high-end option is to go beyond the smaller retaliatory airstrikes that have done little to deter Tehran from threatening ships in the Strait of Hormuz and lobbing missiles at American forces in the region by sharply escalating the war, according to people familiar with his thinking. CENTCOM says last night, forces successfully completed a heavy wave of strikes against Iran in response to yesterday's attempted missile attacks on U.S. forces. The strikes aimed to further diminish threats posed by Iran and its proxies to American forces, commercial shipping, and neighboring Gulf countries. And this all really could turn into a much broader world war if this Reuters report is true about China getting ready to sell Iran tens of millions of dollars worth of shoulder-fire missile launchers built to take out helicopters and fighter jets.
President Xi told you that China would not give or sell Iran any weapons. And there's a new report that Iran's about to get 400 rocket launchers from China going through Pakistan to Iran.
Well, that would be surprising. I mean, things like that happen, but that would be surprising. He told me very strongly he wouldn't partake, and he knows I'd be quite disappointed.
And when we asked the president about this last week, he said that it is his opinion Xi and Putin are not helping the Iranians in this war against the U.S. right now, based on chats that he has had with them. But we also know it is the opinion of some others in the administration in very high levels that China and Russia are at the very least enabling Iran right now. Back to you.
Yeah, not hurting. They got rebuilt somehow in between that long pause, and a lot of people believe there was China doing that. Thanks so much, Peter. Appreciate it. And in terms of location logistics, I mean, they were hitting certain rooms in certain facilities in Kuwait where the CIA was, and they thought there's no way that Iran would know where the CIA was located, that our satellite images had to be given by Russia. But it looks like there's a 2-week plan that Admiral Cooper has submitted, 10 to 14 days, intended to degrade Iran's missile and drone capabilities rather than continuing just to do retaliatory strikes. So that might, this plan, one of the plans, it definitely involves the IDF. And if no one has better intelligence about Iran than Mossad and the IDF, and you would think there would be the targeting part of any type of operation would be led by them.
And you would think that, obviously, President Trump would have spoken with Prime Minister Netanyahu about that. I do think it's interesting because Peter mentioned this NBC report that President Trump is exasperated over his war planners not being on the same page. But you have to take that a little bit with a grain of salt, because this is what advisors do for any commander-in-chief, which is to present the options. I think maybe what they miss, perhaps, in the story is the frustration that the president has with trying to stop Iran and the IRGC from lobbing the missiles at our bases, hitting things like you're just talking about, Brian, while you've got these negotiations going on with the spokesperson or the parliament speaker and the foreign minister of Iran, which is going nowhere.
I love this. Look at the bottom of your screen. Admiral Cooper presents Trump with a plan to demolish Iran's missiles in 14 days. I know that many of the leaders in our military are presenting him with different plans, and Admiral Cooper's head of CENTCOM. We asked Trey Yingst about what Jackie Heinrich was asking the president about China receiving or China giving them 400 Chinese-made shoulder-fired air defense missile launchers to the tune of $60 to $70 million. It's a big purchase if Iran is buying these. And Trey Yingst was telling us that these are used to shoot down planes and choppers, and it just takes one person to man one of these launchers. So that would be a big deal if China were providing these to Iran. And you heard the president say he would be very disappointed. Also, military might require some of the troops in the Middle East to surrender their cell phones, because top U.S. commanders for the Middle East have warned the troops that their cell phone videos that they're sharing online can help Iran target American bases.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I just looked up that company that might be selling the man pads. It doesn't look they have a military background, but they're import-export business, and we're very involved in the Belt and Road program. That's when you come in. China basically says, I'll build your airports, I'll build your canals. In turn, we just want your raw material, or we want your bases, or things to that nature. But it's a building company that raises great capital. Could they deliver those man pads? It looks like they can, but they don't necessarily have a big military background. It looks like they would deliver and finance just about everything, and they are fundamentally supported by the Chinese government, even though located in Hong Kong.
Not a good development considering that type of man pad, as Trey was saying, took down our U.S. aircraft.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.